Hello everyone, welcome to Dinesh QL. My name is Dinesh Priyankara, Data Platform MVP and Business Intelligence Architect. With this video, I'm going to show you the way of creating Azure Data Factory pipelines using Author tab. Let's see what I have added to this video. We're not going to discuss anything related to concepts or Azure Data Factory concepts, but with this video, we'll be explaining a simple ETL solution, and then we'll be showing the way of creating this ETL solution using Azure Data Factory version 2. So I'll be showing the way of creating link services, data sets, and then the pipeline with activities related. And finally, we'll see how we can get this pipeline scheduled based on our requirement. Okay, if you are new to Azure Data Factory and if you have not used it before, I recommend you to watch the first video I have added on Azure Data Factory, because that video explains the concepts like link services, data sets, pipeline, and integration runtime, which we have to use for connecting with sources. And then it talks about the permission setting, like if you want to access Azure Data Lake or Azure Data Lake Store, how you can use app registration for setting permissions. Things like that are discussed in detail with the previous video. So if you are new to Azure Data Factory, first watch that and then continue with this video. Let me explain what I'm going to show you with this video. So I'm going to make a simple ETL solution. I have a SQL database which is in my laptop, so we need to consider it as on-premise SQL Server database, and I'm trying to extract some data from this database to Azure Data Lake Store. So it will be something like this. You'll be extracting, and if something has to be processed, then it will be processed and then stored in Azure Data Lake. So we are not going to talk about processing part using Azure Data Lake Analytics now. We'll be talk about it with a different video. But let's see how we can extract data from on-premise SQL Server DB. Something like this. Like this is what I'm going to access. I'll be accessing the sales table. It has 4 columns, and you can see there's a column called modified date. So I want to make sure I extract data related to previous date only. So if something has been changed, if new records have been added, I need to make sure I extract those changed records and new records. And then I'll be placing these extracted records in Azure Data Lake Store, not just into the root. I want to make sure based on the date, it creates a folder related to year, and then it creates a folder for the month, and then it creates a folder for the date. Once all these 3 folders are created, the file will be placed in the relevant folder. So this is what I want to do as my ETL solution using Azure Data Factory. Okay, let's see what are the steps for creating a pipeline using Author tab. Now, first of all, we need to create link services for whatever the sources we are going to connect with. Now, we know that we are going to extract data from SQL Server, which is an on-premise SQL Server database. So we need to create a link service for that. But in order to connect with the on-premise SQL Server database, you need to have self-hosted integration runtime installed. Again, this has been discussed in detail with the previous video. If you have no idea on self-hosted integration runtime, please watch the previous video. I have already installed self-hosted integration runtime in my machine, so I'll be using that for connecting with my SQL Server. Second step is creating another link service for Azure Data Lake Store, because that's going to be the destination. So we need to make sure we have a link service for Azure Data Lake Store. Third, we need to create a data set for data we are going to extract from SQL Server. We'll be define the schema, and then we'll be using that structure for holding records, extracting from SQL Server database. We need another data set that is for Azure Data Lake Store. Again, we'll be define the schema with columns and data types, and we'll be using it for saving data to Data Lake Store. When we create the data set, we need to specifically mention how the path has to be created. Remember, first year folder, then the month, and then the date folder. So we need to make sure folders are getting created like that. I'll show you the way of adding an expression for getting a path like that created. Then we have to create the pipeline using all these items created, and then we need to use copy activity for performing the data transfer. But we need to make sure we extract data for the previous day. So in that case, when with the extract queries, we need to write an expression for filtering records based on the current date. Finally, the last step is adding a schedule, so then we can get the pipeline executed based on the time we want. Okay, let me show you how to create an Azure Data Factory pipeline for handling this ETL solution. So I'll be showing the way of creating link services, datasets, pipeline, and then as a final step, let's see how we can add a schedule to this created pipeline. Okay, I have already logged into my Azure environment, and I have opened Azure Data Factory 2. I'm going to use an existing Data Factory account. If you want to create a new one, you can simply click on add and fill this small form and get it created. But when you create it, make sure you use the latest version, which is version 2. Let me close this. Let me click on the one I have already created. So when I click on it, I get this detail blade open. I have to click on auth and monitor for creating pipelines. So let me click on that. It opens a new tab, and this is what you are going to see. So with the previous video, I use copy data for getting the pipeline automatically created, but this time I'm going to create the pipeline manually. So I can either click on this, or I can click on this icon for opening author tab. You can see the one I had created before, the pipeline and relevant datasets are exits. So let's start creating a pipeline for discuss ETL solution. So the first step is creating link services. So we have to create two link services, one for SQL Server, which is an on-premise SQL Server database, and other one for Azure Data Lake Store. We have to click on connection. When you open connection, it will list out all added link services in this account. So I'm going to create two new link services. Click on new. I have to select the source type. So let me click on database and then select SQL Server. This is the one, and click on continue. Name of the link service. So I'm going to name this as link service SQL Server my machine name. I'm not going to add any descriptions. And integration runtime, if I expand, I can see the one I have already created and installed in my laptop. So I'll be selecting that. I don't want to create a new one. Server name, database name, I need to enter my SQL Server instance name and the database name. Okay, this is my SQL Server instance name, and this is my database name. So SQL authentication is going to be used. Let me type the username and the password. I can test the connection. So this will check and see whether Azure Data Factory can connect with my SQL Server using self-hosted integration runtime. Connection successful, which means it works fine. So let me click on finish to complete link service creation. Done. I can see my link service created in this blade. So let me create another link service, which is for Azure Data Lake Store. Click on new. I'm going to select Azure and Azure Data Lake Store. That's what I'm going to use. Click on continue, and I'm going to name it like link service Azure Data Lake Store and my account. Okay, so we don't need to worry about integration runtime because it is in Azure, and all I have to do is select the subscription and select the account and add the principal ID and password. So let me select my subscription and then the account. This is the account I'm going to use. That's my Azure Data Lake Store. Tenant has been automatically picked, so I'm going to add principal ID and the principal key. So remember, this is the app registration ID and the password we have created for connecting with or accessing Azure Data Lake Store. This is my server principal ID and the password. So let me test the connection and see. Done. Let me click on finish and complete the link service creation. Okay, we have created required link services. Next step is creating datasets. So this is how you create the dataset. You can click on this plus icon and select dataset. So the first dataset is going to be a SQL Server database dataset. So let me click on database and select SQL Server. Let me name this as dataset SQL Server Dinesh PC. Let me click on connection tab, and then I have to select the link service I created, which is this. And I'm not going to directly access a table. I'm going to define the schema, and then that structure will be loaded based on the code we write for extracting data. So if I want, I can select the table, but let me go into schema tab and create the schema. So I'm going to add 4 columns. Let me click on this 4 times and let me fill this. Okay, these are the 4 columns I'm going to have in my data set. Let me set the data type. So sales order ID is going to be integer 32. Order date should be date time. Subtotal should be decimal. We don't have currency data type here. And again, modified date is date time. If I want, I can add descriptions, but I don't have anything to be added now. And we have created our data set. Now remember, there is no save button in this author tab. So all I have to do is click on publish in order to get all the things you created saved. But let me create the next data set and then publish everything for saving. Let me click on plus again, create a data set. It's going to be Azure and Azure Data Lake Store. Click on finish, and I'm going to name the data set as dataset Azure Data Lake Store, Azure Data Lake. Okay, and connection, I need to select the connection I have created, which is this. Okay, the file name is going to be sales. I want to save all my extracted data as a sales file, and then I want to make sure that the folder structure or the folder path is automatically created based on the date we use. So I'm going to use an expression for setting the file path. This is the expression I'm going to use. So this expression has 3 sections, one for year, one for month, and one for date. So let's try to understand the way it has been written. So you need to start with this slash that indicates the root, and the first folder has to be created based on this part. So this is how you write expression with Azure Data Factory. I have used 2 functions, or actually 3 functions. One is UTC now, which returns the current date and time, and I have used add days for subtracting 1 day from the current date and time, and then I'm trying to get the year part using format date time function. So as you see, this returns the current date and time. Then I reduce 1 from this using add days. So for example, if the date is 30th of January, I'll be getting 29th of January as a result of this. And then I'm trying to extract the year portion of this result using format date time. So that's going to be the first folder, and the second folder, same set of function, but it returns month. Third expression, it returns the date. So this is how the path is going to be created. So let me copy this expression and paste it here. Done. So other things, I don't want to worry about compression type, and it's going to be text format, comma separated, the row delimiter is fine, so everything looks okay. So the next part is creating the schema for this. Let me click on schema, and I'm going to have 4 columns again. Let me fill this. Done. I don't want to change the data types because it's going to be a CSV file, and that's all. So I have created both my data sets. So you can see a small icon indicating that these two have not been published. So let me click on publish to save all the things I have created. So everything is done. So we have two connections, we have two data sets. Now we need to create a pipeline. So I can click on plus icon, select pipelines to get a pipeline created. This is just like SSIS. If you expand these items, you can see multiple components or multiple elements, or you can call them as tasks, steps, or activities available for configuring your pipeline. Now with this ETL, all I need is extract data from my source and place them into Azure Data Lake Store. So it's going to be a copy activity. So let me drag and drop copy activity into this control flow, or we can say it is data flow. So let me name this as copy SQL DB to Azure Data Lake Store. So that's my name. I don't want to change any other settings. So let me go into source and select the data set. So I have already created a data set called SQL Server Dinesh PC. That's the data set I'm going to use. And you can see there are three options: table, query, stored procedure. So we'll be writing a query for extracting data. Let me select query, and this is where we have to write. So let me show you the query I'm going to use for extracting data. Okay, this is the query. So I'll be extracting 4 columns: sales order ID, order date, subtotal, modified date from this table. And this is how I have added the where condition. So I'm filtering modified date. I'm converting it to date first, and then the value will be passed based on this expression. This is just like the previous one. I'm accessing the current, I'm trying to get the current date and time, and then use add days function for get the previous date, and then convert the whole thing into this format. And then I can check and see whether this tallies with modified date. If there are tallied records, then that's a data set I want to get into my data lake store. So let me copy this and paste here. Okay, so that's the source. Then the sink or the target. Let me click on the third tab. I want to pass this to dataset ADSL my account. So that's my dataset related to Azure Data Lake Store. I don't want to worry about copy behavior. Let me click on mapping. Since we have created datasets in a sort of same structure, we don't need to do any sort of mapping, and we have not discussed about parameters or any other advanced settings. So that's all we have to do. Let me publish everything and see. Done. I'm going to execute this pipeline now. Yes, we have to schedule it, but I can execute without scheduling. Let me go back to my data lake store and see. Let me click on the Data Explorer for opening the Data Lake Store. As you see, there are no other folders except the system folders, catalog and system. These are system folders. Since this Data Lake Store has been linked with Data Lake Analytics, these two folders have been created. Okay, so let me go back to my Azure Data Factory. Okay, everything is done. All we have to do is now schedule it. But before scheduling, let's test it and see whether it works fine. So I can click on test run. So the execution just started. I can go to monitor and monitor this execution, or else I can use this output tab related to pipeline. I can see it is getting executed in progress. Okay, so it has been executed and no errors. Let me go back to my Data Lake Store and see. Let me refresh this. I can see 2018 folder. I can see January folder, and I can see the folder for 31st, and I can see the sales files in 31st folder. So let me click on this file and have a look on some of the records. I can see the records that have been extracted are modified on this date, 2018 January 31st. So only records that have been modified or inserted on this date have been extracted to my Data Lake Store. So this is how you configure Azure Data Lake Factory Pipeline using Author tab for creating your ETL solution. Let's see how we can schedule this. I can click on trigger, and I can select new and edit menu item. Let me expand this and select new. So that's going to be my trigger. I'll name this as schedule SQL to Azure Data Lake Store. And there are two options or two types of trigger. Like you can select as schedule, or you can set it as tumbling window. For example, if you want to get something executed, or if you want to get this pipeline executed every 5 minutes or every 10 minutes, you can use something like tumbling window. But let me select schedule, and I can say I want to get it executed every day. I can specify the time. For example, I can say hour is 4 and I can say minutes is 0. As you see, you can actually give multiple times, and based on whatever the numbers you have entered here, it will create schedules. So once you click on next, you get another window for setting up parameters, but we don't have any parameters. So let me click on finish. It will add the schedule as we have entered, or as we have created. Okay, everything is done. So this is how you create a pipeline manually using Azure Data Factory Author tab. Okay, so there are so many other things to be discussed with Azure Data Factory. So let's talk about other features, functionalities, different activity types available with some other videos. Thanks for watching.